The last section that we covered, we had Abraham Lincoln going to win the presidency in 1860, and that's when the lower southern states seceded and formed the Confederacy. And this section, we're going to get into the first shots of the Civil War being fired and where at, and then kind of getting the stage set for the war. So we'll only really cover one battle in this section, okay? I'm going to split my screen real quick so I can show you what I'm talking about as far as the information. Where we're at, this is a picture of present day Fort Sumter in South Carolina, in the harbor there. Now, as I have here, that's where the first shots of the Civil War is going to be fired. Where we're at is Major Anderson is in this fort, and a couple of days after Abraham Lincoln was sworn in, he gets a letter from them saying that we're low on supplies, we need help. The Confederates are forcing us or asking us to evacuate and to surrender. We'll hold on. Abraham Lincoln had to make the decision. Do I let them have it? Do I send supplies? He chose to send supplies. He wrote a letter, the governor there, telling them coming. But before that happened, Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy, ordered his men to open fire on Fort Sumter. 34 hours later, Major Anderson is forced to surrender. And this is basically what we say is the first shots of the Civil War being fired. Now, what's going to happen from there is President Lincoln now states the southern states are in a state of rebellion. He asked the governors of all the states he needed about 75,000 militiamen to put this rebellion down. A lot thinking this is going to be quick and easy. Well, before or after that happens, a few more states are going to secede. And if you look at this map for a second, we know that these dark gray were the first states that seceded, with South Carolina kind of leading the charge on that. Well, these other states here, we called these the lower states. Now these are the upper states: Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, and North Carolina. Now, up until this point in time, remember, Virginia was whole, but West Virginia wanted to break off and create their own state because the slavery issue and also wanting to stay in the Union. With this, up until this point in time, remember, the capital of the Confederacy was down in Montgomery, Alabama. Now that Virginia has seceded, they're going to move the capital to Richmond, Virginia. So fairly close to our nation's capital there also. There's also some other states that when it was time to choose sides, there's going to be what we call some border states. That's Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. They're kind of a buffer between the Union and the Confederacy. Were there slavery in those states? Sure, we know that the Missouri Compromise had to do with the state of Missouri wanting to come in as a slave state. So yes, slavery was there, but they chose to stay loyal to the Union. They had ties with the North and South both. These countries did. They chose to not pick up arms against them. Now, when President Lincoln would talk about these states right here, with this, he would talk about the importance of those states. What was the importance of Missouri? Well, Missouri run along the Mississippi River right here, perfect to transport goods and soldiers. Kentucky, very important along the Mississippi, going along here to the Ohio, connecting. And President Lincoln had made one comment: if I lose Kentucky, I will lose the ball game. So he knew the importance of that. Maryland, its importance, nation's capital is located right there. So if they had fallen, our capital would have been in the southern states, probably would have been a whole different ballgame. So President Lincoln had to send troops into these border states, keep the peace. He did a wonderful balancing act of keeping them from tipping over and going down to the south. So it's very important what he was able to do there. Now, I have the colors here, gray and blue. At the beginning of the war, it was kind of confusing. A lot of men, when they enlisted, they didn't have specific colors. Uh, a lot of men wore their own clothing, so it was confusing. They eventually chose on the Confederate gray and, of course, the Union blue. Now, looking at resources, when you get into what each side had, if you look at this map and you just looked at it and knew nothing else, you would think, how in the world did this war go on for 4 years? Because the light gray here is what the Union had, and the dark or the black here is what the Southern states had. Doesn't even look like they should be even on the same battlefields. Population-wise, in the North, they had about 22 million people. Importance of that is working factories. They have a bigger pool to pull from for soldiers. Then you have railroads. There's railroads, major difference there. There's only about 9,000 in the South. There's about 22,000 miles in the North. Transporting goods and soldiers, also going to be important. Factories important, natural resources, coal, wheat, iron, everything they needed to produce things in factories were going to be there. There was more money, banking capital. The South ends up printing some money. It causes a financial chaos later on. We'll talk about the worthiness of a Confederate dollar later on. So looking just at what both sides had as far as money and people and railroad and all of that, it looks very one-sided. But when you're the underdog, you're going to fight a lot harder. And basically, where's the fighting going to take place? In the Southern states. The North's going to have to travel to their battles. The South can sit back and play kind of a defensive game, hoping that the North will get tired of the war and leave them alone and let them have their way of life. But President Lincoln vowed to restore the Union, and that's what he was going to do. Now, getting the game plan for this, at the time, General Winfield Scott comes up with this plan, and it's a two-part strategy they call the Anaconda Plan. Remember, Anaconda is a snake that is going to circle its prey, squeeze it, and suffocate it, and that's kind of what his plan was going to do. He was hoping to blockade the southern coast and keep any imports from coming in and out of the southern ports, and gain control of the Mississippi River and divide the Confederacy in half. So if you look at this was a cartoon that's always in your history books, and I used it. They drew the snake, and it circles the southern states, and this would basically be a line of ships and so forth, keeping goods from coming in and out, and also cutting off at the Mississippi River. So the Anaconda Plan's what they called it. Some of the other generals also said what they needed to do was to just march right into Richmond, take over the capital. This war is going to be over. Both sides thought the war was going to be over very quickly, but didn't quite happen like that, we know. When it was time to enlist, because I said, after Fort Sumter's, when Lincoln called for 75,000 men to enlist, he got way over that number. So lots of men joined. Why? What type of men? You're talking farmers, average young men, people that worked in, teachers were one of them. In the North, you had a lot more to pull from, but you just had average, nice people. No military training whatsoever. Some men joined for, of course, the Patriot cause to keep the Union together and also to rid slavery. Others joined because they needed a paycheck. And at this point in time, a soldier, a private, would make about $13 a month if they decided to enlist. Others wanted to travel. They'd never been out of their area. Some, boredom, wanted to be a part of this cause. So lots of men signed up on both sides for different reasons. Once they got there, they realized, there's not a lot of money to finance this. They're not getting as much as what they thought they would, and it's a lot of dull time in training and so forth, but they're going to be thrown into battle really quicker than what they probably should have been because they weren't well prepared. Now, when you look, we looked at the chart and saw it was really one-sided. So what did the South have? The South had some brilliant officers. Remember on the raid of Harper's Ferry, John Brown, remember I talked about Robert E. Lee led Marines into putting the uprising down. Well, Robert E. Lee, a fantastic leader, said, I cannot raise arms against my home state of Virginia. So when Virginia seceded, he left and went and fought for the Confederacy. The southern states had a lot of farms. They were able to provide food and resources for their soldiers. They were fighting at home. They knew the land, kind of like the American Revolution, fighting at home. They knew the land, and so that was an advantage to them. Rivers down there were also an advantage. A lot of the times they were able to use the rivers as a weapon or an obstacle that the North had to manage. So I said, both sides are going to rush into this, not really prepared. It's going to be disastrous to start with. The first battle that we'll cover in the next section is going to be the Battle of Bull Run, and we're going to see how the North thought this war was going to be over very quickly and easily, and the South had a different plan for them, and things changed after that. This was a war that everyone's going to have to get involved in. Women played an important role in this too, as far as being nurses and taking care of things when the men were gone. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell was the first woman to receive a license to practice medicine, and she and some others really pressured President Lincoln to get things organized for these men. If we're going to have this war, we're going to have goods and hospitals and all the needs for those. So they pushed them to form the U.S. Sanitary Commission. They called it the Sanitary most of the time. Tens of thousands of volunteers helped run this. They organized and would gather up supplies, bandages, medicines, foods, things for the Union Army and hospitals, and they would deliver them. Over 3,000 women became nurses and helped out through the war. And remember, at this point in time in history, it's still not ladylike to be a nurse, because you were tending to soldiers and men that you did not know, and that wasn't ladylike. We know the profession of a nurse today is one of the most respectable professions you can have. My daughter's training to be a nurse right now, and right now it's also a scary time with everything that's going on with this virus and so forth. So I've kind of laid the groundwork for getting into some of the battles. We do know that the first shots have been fired. The sides have been chosen now, and now the men are training, getting ready to go into their first battle. Okay, after that, you have the worksheet right here that I want sent. Remember also, guys, I put on my website that I wanted you to do the little pre-test before, 12 questions. Really, just go through there, answer the best you can, send it to me. That's going to be one of your grades. The other one's going to be this little worksheet, and it's just true and false. If it's true, put a T in there, leave it alone. If it's false, let's make it a true statement. So question 1 says, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln became president of the United States. True, yes, he did. That's when the southern states said we can't stay. Number 2, in his inaugural address, remember his accepting the role, inauguration, being sworn in, he promised to end slavery all over the South. Absolutely false. He did not. He said, where slavery exists, I will leave it alone, but we cannot let it expand. He was firm on that. He wanted no compromises, and that's the way it was going to be. Number 3, Fort Sumter was a federal outpost in Charleston, South Carolina. It was attacked by the Confederate troops, basically beginning the war. True. Yes, it was. Number 4, wedged between the North and South were the key border states of Delaware, Kentucky, Maryland, and Missouri. True. We're also going to have West Virginia basically in there too. So that is true. Number 5, cotton diplomacy. I talked to you a little bit about that. That was the idea that France would support the Confederacy because it needed the South's raw cotton supply. That is false. And that's because it was Great Britain that they were holding out on, wanting to pressure them to come and give them aid. Okay. So get that sent to me. I've had quite a few of you turn your stuff in. I've put some grades in the grade book, so you might want to check that. I'm sure you're still getting alerts when those types of things happen. Tuesday and Thursday at 1. Remember, the password for mine is Hickman with a capital H, then 206. So Hickman 206 is the password to get into my Zoom meetings. Hop in, say hi. Any questions? If you have trouble sending something, let me know then. Okay. Hope you guys had a great Easter, and I will post new videos next week. I'm going to take the share off for just a second. Again, if you have trouble, just hop on here and let me know this week. Thanks, guys.